Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who has helped me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Paul Zolman, who draws on some life experiences early in life, some of the generational cultural events that occurred in his past that came forward and affected him in the context of love as equates to relationships. What he has done is become what I call a chain breaker, in that he is making a choice not to carry forward some of the past traditions that brought him to this point. Through Dr. Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, he has tailored that message of the 5 love languages into an adaptable method to relate to others. Marty, what are some takeaways our listeners can get from Paul?
I love Paul's story where he knew at a certain point in his life that he was just copying what he grew up with, the abuse, and decided that I've got to change that. Like you said, he developed his own 5 love languages. He made a decision he was not going to do to his children what was done to him. As you said, the chain breaker. And then he commented that each day, give something to someone else. And that really helps you with your attitude about your past and how you can move forward.
It's a great story. That which we want, sometimes we have to learn to first give. Let's listen and learn together. Paul, it's good to have you with us. Our listeners are going to be very interested in your description of what you describe as an austere beginning of your life, where you were maybe a little bit uncertain of what love is, and through that beginning, you have not redefined love, but you have, I'm going to use the term, you've customized it to where it works well for you. Our listeners, I think, are going to be very interested in knowing a brief background, a brief summary of your past that have brought you to this point. And our listeners are going to be very, very interested in knowing love, what it is, and, just how to work with it. But Paul, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Ron. Glad to be a part of your show.
Describe to us, Paul, in your own terms, kind of somewhat of a top level of the background that got you to this point. Our emphasis is today and forward. Our listeners are very interested in somewhat of a top level background.
Ron and Marty, I appreciate the opportunity here. And I think I just want to start just a couple generations back, because I think what has happened in my family is generational, and it may have been generational for a lot of your listeners as well. I had a grandfather in the late 1800s, early 1900s that had 9 children. After that 9th child was born in Indiana, his wife passed away. And that wife, or that my grandfather, of course, anybody would be distraught if their spouse passed away, but he was very distraught. And when we're distraught, we're not supposed to make major decisions. Well, he apparently did not know that rule. So decided he was going to sell the farm and sell all the equipment. And when people came to that auction, he said something like this: "And would you like this child? And would you like this child? And would you like this child?" And systematically gave away all the children except for one. And he took that one child, Benjamin, with him to Montana and found a school teacher that had never been married, had 10 more children with a school teacher, of which my father was number 6. So my father was born in 1922. This grandfather passed away in 1932, right in the heat of the Depression. Now you've got 19 children abandoned, and you've got financial, economic issues because of the Great Depression. Couple that together and think of all the other pressures that they might have had because of the bad decisions that grandfather had made to do all that. And then you've got kind of where the roots of my family came from. My father felt this financial pressure and just graduated from 8th grade and then went right to work. Felt like he probably had to help his mother with the economic things. His older brothers were mechanics, so that's what he decided to do. Became a diesel mechanic and then transferred to become a truck driver. And that's what I knew of him as growing up. As a truck driver, he'd come home every Friday night. And he kind of toned it down. He did not have 19 children. I'm number 10 of 11. He only had 11. So I'm number 10. And so as number 10, I'm way down the line. And you can imagine all my older brothers, older siblings would make decisions like I was the remote control back in the day. That my brothers or sister would tell me, go change the channel on the TV. And I'd have to walk up to the TV and turn the dial to whatever channel they want. I was the real live remote control of the day. Well, my father, when he'd come home on Friday every week, he would absolutely, without fail, take my mother out on a date. And I love that about my father. I don't remember a day or a Friday that he ever missed taking my mother out on a date. It was a great thing that he did and a great example. I haven't even been able to follow that example. I can't imagine how he did it. But anyway, I love that. But he wasn't very creative about the date. Ron and Marty, he always took her to the Maverick Bar, and it was always a discussion over alcohol. And so as I was never there, but I can imagine my mother telling my father at the time, starting with the oldest child and going to systematically down to the youngest, my father's getting upset because these older brothers, they're doing stuff and they're like little puppies, they're wrestling and they're how puppies will paw each other when they're wrestling and they'll just roll around like that. And they're breaking arms and they're doing that sort of thing. And my father's getting annoyed because, his temperature's rising. Now he gets annoyed, and then he gets to number 10. My mom gets to number 10. And I feel like I got a lot of the wrath of my father in that way, that I either got the belt or a very severe spanking. I never looked forward to the weekends because it always happened on Friday. It was after the date, and then he'd come home and then that's when we get the punishment. Sometimes it wasn't that way. Sometimes it was nice. Sometimes it was amicable that we were able to spend time together. But when he took me on a date, or when he spent time with me, he also took me to the Maverick Bar. I learned how to shoot pool, and I hated the contaminated 7-Up. It came out of this little nozzle thing that had like 11 or 12 buttons on it, and alcohol came through that nozzle, and soda pop came through all the same nozzle. The 7-Up totally tasted contaminated. I didn't like the 7-Up, but I loved learning how to play pool. Anyway, that's kind of the picture of what happened. I remember just one time getting spanked so hard that my rear end was black and blue for about 3 weeks. So it was really severe in that type of punishment that we got. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to call. It's like Ghostbusters. Who are you going to call? And it was just it was that kind of situation. We didn't have the network of people to call that we've got today. So I thought it was just a family issue. We keep it within the family and it stays right there. And so nobody was called. At age 17, I decided I had enough. I'm out of here. I had went to work myself and had a car. It was after my junior year of high school that I moved away from home, and I moved in with my brother. And my brother's was a father. He had a couple of children at the time, and he was really trying to be a very good father, except that he had this problem that he'd be annoyed, and then he'd flash. And then I started dating and get married, and I realized I had the same problem, and I felt like it's a generational thing that was happening here, Ron and Marty, that it was being passed on from, we learned from what our parents teach us that way. And I thought, enough is enough. I said to myself, I don't want to be angry. And that's kind of a double negative sentence. And so double negatives only work in math. That if you multiply two negative numbers, then you get a positive. It doesn't work in relationships. And I found that out. So at age 35, I decided, I think I'm responsible now for my own actions, because up until that time, I was blaming my father for all social awkwardness. If you get mad in public, it's like tearing up a little piece of paper into tiny bits, throwing it to the wind. Now go collect all those pieces. How are you going to do that? How are you going to get all that anger back from that you just sent out? And it was having a really hard time trying to do that. It was the same thing with the family. And I believe that anger actually was contributory to the demise of my first marriage. It wasn't all of it, but it was part of that, the demise of my first marriage. I toned it down from my father. I only had 8 children, just so you know. So 19 to 11 to 8, my children only have 3. I don't understand that. I don't understand what's going on there, Ron and Marty. You probably have grandchildren yourself. I'd like to have more. That's what we got married for, right? So we'd have grandchildren, not children. After 23 and a half years of marriage, I find myself single. I have primary custody of the remaining 5 children. 3 had already left the nest. I have primary custody of the 5 children remaining. And on the weekends off, when she's got the children, I decide I'm going to go out and have like a midlife crisis thing. And I went out destination dating. So I'd go online, I'd find someone in a different city, and we'd decide on a city that we're going to meet. We'd have a date, and then we'd both go home. And I did that for about a year and a half. And I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and Charlotte, North Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, Daytona Beach, Jacksonville, Nashville, Kansas City, New York City, Salt Lake City, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Cabo San Lucas. I went all these places for destination dates. And it was like the lyrics of the song, I was looking for love in all the wrong places, not finding a thing. I thought I had a real good line on someone and actually moved to Phoenix, and it didn't turn out. So here I am in Phoenix. I'm all alone. My ex-wife had decided that she was going to move home and move in with her parents. And so she wanted the remaining 3 children. So I relinquished primary custody to her. I thought it'd be a great idea for those 3 children to get to know their grandparents a whole lot better. And it really turned out to be a great idea. But so now I'm single, I'm all alone. My older sister calls me up and says, she's 7 hours away by driving. And she says, I've got this neighbor that I want to introduce to you. I said, I don't think so. I've just been doing all this destination dating. I don't want to do it again. I'm tired. She says, oh, come on. You know, I'm number 10. I've got to do what big sister and big brother say. So I said, all right. I thought, I'll email her. What kind of relationship can you develop email? And it turned out actually that it turned out quite well. She was so humorous. One time I remember asking a question, well, how many times have you been married to this neighbor? She says, counting the 5 that are buried in the backyard. And I just roared with laughter. I thought, that's hilarious. I mean, I got a fish on the line here. And so I started developing this relationship, and soon I moved up to where she's at. I started going up there and then moved up there, started getting a little bit more serious. Now it's time to take this woman for big brother approval 300 miles north. First thing I do is when we go in there, my sister-in-law pulls her aside and said, the only emotion that the Zolman family learned growing up was anger. At first I denied it, said, then it made me mad. I thought, she caught me. And I realized at that point that this was a generational thing, that I had an opportunity to change that perception of the Zolman family right then and there. So I started reading the color code, and then I started reading the 5 love languages, and I really kind of settled on the principles of the 5 love languages. They resonated with me. Dr. Gary Chapman is a reverend, and I'm a Christian, and he said that those 5 love languages actually reconcile to the life of Jesus Christ. I did the reconciliation for myself and said, I agree. I absolutely agree. But I didn't understand where I came from. I did not understand what he was saying. He said, Ron or Marty, I'm supposed to guess what your love language is and then cater to that? And you're calling that love? Dr. Chapman, I don't understand that. This doesn't make any sense. That doesn't sound like love. That sounds more like a manipulation or a duty-bound thing. And then the second thing that Dr. Chapman has in the book is that, well, if you take this survey, then I could find out what my love language is. Well, Ron, what am I supposed to do with that? Advertise? Oh, Ron and Marty, I'm gifts. What do you have for me today? I mean, that's a little bit ridiculous as well as awkward. That wasn't working for me either. So I thought, I remember times, even as dysfunctional as our family was, I remember times that when I was young that we played games and it brought the family together. And there was still all that put downs and all the smack talk and all the highly competitiveness that goes on with that. But it brought our family together. I thought, what if I could make this a game? So I contacted Dr. Chapman and said, are you licensing those little icons that you have for each one of the love languages? And his attorney wrote back and said, no, we're not at the time. And so I said, well, that's good because they're really ugly. They're from 1990 and it really dated. I didn't want them anyway. So I decided I'm going to make my own. But before I did that, I said, I better check with an attorney. When I went to this copyright or intellectual property attorney, I found out that theory, like the love language theory, is not copyrightable. Application is. So his applications were different. He didn't have it as a game. So I decided I'm going to create a game. So I created my own icons and then put it on a die. There you see the hand holding an hourglass, that represents time. The hand holding the platter, that represents service. 2 hands put together, forming a heart with a conversation fly out. Those are the words. 2 hands touching one another, that's the touch. And then a hand holding a gift, that's gifts. So those are 5 love languages. There's 6 sides on the cube. The 6th side is surprise me. It's a hand with a question mark above it. There's just 2 instructions. You roll the die every day. That's the love language you practice giving away all day that day, all day. It's not like I did the dishes, woohoo, I'm done. It's not an event anymore. It's a characteristic that becomes part of you, that you're giving love away all day. So what I found was that over a 30-day period of giving it away, I knew the love languages backwards and forwards. I could say them all. I could not do that when I read the book 4 or 5 times. I went through the book, but the book didn't go through me. If someone offered $1 million, Ron, at that time and said, recite all the 5 love languages, I might get 3. I could not spit it out. I found a lot of people are like that today. They've heard about it, but they only know what they know. They only know what they like, or they only know what someone else might like. There are very few that know all of them and that can say them all. But I found out while I'm giving it away, I'm learning it backwards and forwards, and it gave me the eyes to see it when it comes my way. Most people don't have that peripheral vision, they have more myopic, that they can only see what they consider as love, only their primary love language. This gave me that peripheral vision. So I say, oh, they're loving on me. It's not my primary love language, but I can respond appropriately to that. So I think that it's really helped me understand when people are sending love my way, and I can just respond appropriately. The other thing that it did for me is that I stopped being annoyed. I realized what I was being annoyed about was what someone else was doing. I realized I don't have any choice on what they choose to do. I don't have any control over it. And why should I be annoyed at something I don't have any control over? What I do have control over is the love I send out and how I react. And so I realized that that's my lane. Stay in my lane, and then I stopped being annoyed. I started saying, instead of what's wrong with that person, new question, the paradigm shift became, what's right with that person? What can I love about that person? And that's kind of where I'm at today.
Paul, that's great. Several topics, several thoughts actually come to mind. One, we're all a product of, or at least affected by, generational culture to a degree. Your grandfather, followed by your father, then you. You could have easily said, and maybe in hindsight, you would say, well, that's all I knew. That was the culture. That was the family we were raised. But then there was a time in your life, Paul, I'm processing, reading into what you're saying, is I don't want to continue being what I was. I don't want to continue the family culture. I call that being a chain breaker. And you decided to just make the decision that we're not going to continue doing what's been done in the past. I, Paul, am going to make a cultural change, a mindset change, and so forth. Paul, I don't want to say things that don't represent what you were thinking, what you did, but that's part of what I'm processing.
Absolutely. That's spot on, Ron. That's exactly what happened with me. I decided that those traditions of the fathers really were untrue. There were just some thought processes that absolutely were skewed, that needed to be changed, there needed to be an upgrade. And I think part of the upgrade was education. That, my father graduated from 8th grade. My older brother that I went to live with, actually was the first college graduate in our whole family, all the way back. And I don't even know if my grandmother, that was a school teacher, don't know that she had a full college education that way either. So I think it's educational. I think it's the choice as well.
There are two principles that come to mind, Paul, as you were describing what you just did, and it's very well done. One is you tend to find what you look for. If you are looking for something bad, you'll probably find it, particularly in someone else. But if you're looking for something positive in someone else, you'll find it. And the other thing is sometimes, and it's taken me a while to learn this, what you want, sometimes you need to learn how to give first. And when you learn how to give love, you can get it in return. And there's sometimes we have to overcome the mindset, well, I haven't been loved, and I have been mistreated, all these kinds of things. But I think, Paul, it's a mindset shift the part of that mindset shift is we have to rise above. Did any of that, what I just said, apply to you? And everybody's different.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ron. That's a great question. I think what I realized that through this whole process, Ron, Marty, is that it's not about me, and it's not about my love language. When I read the book, direction was really a problem for me. I didn't understand. Well, was that toward me? Or was that something I'm sending this out so I can get something? It sounded more like a transaction, because people sending out their primary love language in hopes that it's coming right back to them. That's reciprocity. And to me, that's a transaction. That's still not love. Well, what if I tell somebody how to love me? Then what happens? Well, it's more duty bound then in that way. And then you get to the unintentional pity party that Dr. Chapman made. He said, well, I told you how to love me. How come you're not doing it? And it's just, I did not even want to go that direction at all. So that really, really helped me stay out of that. It really helped me stay with just what it's all about them. And it's really about helping make somebody's day. Number one, I felt paid, so to speak, felt paid or rewarded when I helped someone be happy. As I'm rolling the die and practicing that love language, I'm watching for people to light up. When they light up, bingo. It's either their primary or a secondary love language, but it's something that they like. They really like it because they light up. Their eyes go wide. They just get surprised. They get this happy look on their face. They're lighting up. And I'm watching for that. So no longer do I have to pause the relationship, say, excuse me, could you take the survey so I know how to love you? Use your observation skills. That's what this is all about.
I think a part of this, Marty and I have each read Dr. Chapman's book, The Five Love Languages. We're attuned to our respective love languages. I think a part of this is learning to adapt to each other. And Marty and I are all about connected relationships. When I say connected, I'm talking about meaningful relationship, not necessarily one where you intend to date or anything like that, but it's a meaningful relationship. Let's put it at least that way. And in that context, if we have a mindset and a heart, we want to adapt to other people, we know what to be aware of. What are the positive attributes of the person with whom we're communicating? And I think, Paul, at least for Marty and me, we try to learn to adapt not only to each other, but to others when we're listening for and we know what to be aware of. That's some of what we're about, but that's some of my application of the love language book.
Absolutely. And I think that to just expand it, the love language book, the five love languages by Dr. Chapman, is really more about romantic relationships rather than any other kind of relationships. And I only say that because he talks about a lot about having a significant other to practice this with. Well, I created this when I was single, and I'm going through this time in my life while I'm single, and I have nobody that's significant other at the time. So I decide, well, I'll just do it to everybody. So I'm saying some compliment to the store clerk. Wow, you scanned my things so rapidly. How did you do that so fast? Or something like that, something genuine, or talk about their hair, or talk about something that you can see that's so genuine that they actually feel love at the moment. And you're watching for those people to light up. And it really is to everyone that I don't know anyone, Ron and Marty, not anyone that is with their significant other 24/7. So what that translated to me was that Dr. Chapman, you've developed a part-time job. I want to make this a full-time job. I want to make it a full-time vocation. I want that characteristic of being able to send love out all day long. And so that's kind of the tack that I took. As I'm single, I did it to everybody. And that's what I'm suggesting now, that this is really something, a human decency that really, really needs to be sent out to everyone. Let's reduce the road rage. Let's reduce all the rage out there and start loving, watching for those things that are right about people.
I'm going to try to process what you said, and we all agree that Dr. Chapman's book, The Five Love Languages, is about intimate relationship, marriages, and that kind of relationship. But I think, Paul, what you're saying is, and again, I want you to correct me if I'm not interpreting correctly what you're saying, we can adapt the love language book to reduce what I think is a lot of hate that is around our globe right now. And sometimes people seem to be looking for reasons to dislike other people. But if we apply the aspects of the love language, we're able to find the good in other people. And again, I don't want to misinterpret what you're saying, misapply it, but that's some of what I think, that's how I'm applying what you're saying.
Absolutely, Ron and Marty. That's exactly what I'm saying, that this does apply. Just think of this. If you put this in the school system, and every day the school teacher at the beginning of the classroom, I'm talking K through 6 because they're more in a kind of a test situation where they're in the same class at the beginning of the day that they are at the end of the day. So you put this in the test situation, takes 2 seconds to roll the die, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds for a teacher to say, now class, this is the type of behavior we're watching for that day. In that, at the end of the day is the last 10 to 15 minutes of the day is really non-productive. I've talked to teachers around the world. The kids are antsy. They've been there all day long. Their brain is fried. They can't learn a darn thing more. And they know that, and the teacher knows that. And so it's playtime or it's just downtime. In that downtime or that non-productive time, as I'm calling it, have those children record what they rolled, what opportunities they saw to love in that way, and what they did about those opportunities. Now, what you've done Instead of these children having to wait to age 35, like I was, to take responsibility for themselves, now you're teaching them responsibility for their own actions. They have to write about it. At the end of the day, every day, they're rolling the die, and at the end of every day, they have to report what did they do that day that was loving. This, for these children, becomes a love journal over the period of the school year. The teacher will just check off that they did it, send that page home. Astute parents will gather all those papers together at the end of that year. I would bind it if I was a parent of one of those children, put it together, either a spiral bind or some way, bind that piece of paper, all those papers together. There's a spot there for the date. And now you've got a journal from their first grade. I remember my first grade teacher, Mrs. Rogers. Why do I remember her name? I don't remember my second grade teacher. I don't remember my third grade teacher. I do remember my fourth grade teacher, but why do I remember that first grade teacher's name? Maybe because she was my first teacher, maybe, but I remember the kindnesses. She was elderly, and I remember her just teaching with kind words, and just I would have loved to have had a journal to be more specific about what I loved about that class and why I loved it, what I did about those loving feelings that I had about that class. That's kind of the kind of application I think that we're talking about. Just one application. It could work in the workplace too. People need to be loved for employers need people that love people for their customer service. They want a loving workplace. They don't want a hostile workplace. It dampens the productivity in a workplace. If you've got a loving atmosphere, people are helping one another. They're not trying to sabotage. They're not trying to be hostile, and that would be non-productive time. That the employer can't afford that either. So lots of applications. You're right.
You are right on target. We know the statistics prove it. People will stay or leave an organization, stay with or leave an organization based on the people and the culture more so than the compensation. And when the connected relationships are there, when they feel they belong, when they feel they're valued, they will stay with an organization, even if another organization might be able to pay them more. But if the culture is not good in that other organization that might be able to pay them more, they stay where they are with that good culture. Paul, do you have a course that you have put together that you're describing in this podcast?
I don't quite yet, Ron, and that's a great question. Thank you very much for that. I'm looking for 2024 to have a course. I've done several podcasts. At this point in time, I'm trying to get to the point that I'll be writing another book about it, and I'm also working on an app so that the people can have it in their hands. They can, with a push of the button, they can roll the die, and then it'll give them a few, maybe 4 or 5 suggestions of what they could do that day to practice love in that way. It might give them a quote from a famous person about love, maybe a scripture about love. So I'm working on the app right now, and then after those 2 projects of the book and the app are done, then I'm going to go into the coaching and prepare some courses that way. But it's great. The other day, just to what you just said about the workplace, the other day I heard a quote that somebody said that you don't really quit a job, you quit management. Even if the job is great, if the management is so bad that it just becomes oppressive, you're going to want to leave that job. Let's change that. We can change that up, and let's teach these people in the workplace how to love and love one another.
I think you have a great future, Paul. This is what needs to be taught with leadership. This is what needs to be taught to have connected relationships, and it applies across the board, whether it's a relationship where you're hoping to have a lifetime mate, or whether it's in the workplace. No matter where it is, there's application across the spectrum of relationships with what you're talking about. We look forward to following your progress. We look forward to advocating exactly what you're doing, Paul, scripturally based. This is what God is all about. The first commandment, the greatest of which is to love. And when we learn how to do that, we're going to be able to turn around a lot of the hate that is endemic in our country.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Ron. Thank you very much.
Well, Paul, on behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for the work you're doing, and we will do everything we can to advocate, collaborate with you. This is exactly what our country needs, and you are on the right track. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ron and Marty. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life's experiences with you.
The Cooper culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and DISC personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.